Okay, welcome back to another episode of Sex, Drugs, and Soul. I am excited today to have on a certified sexologist, a sex and intimacy coach, Coral Osborne. She's also a consultant. I love everything that she shares on social media at the Unreal Coral Osborne on Instagram. I like trying to narrow down some of these questions. I was like, literally, I have notes.
I'm trying to remember my brain and things I've posted recently.
You're good. You're good. I'm like deep in the heart of my cycle too. So I'm like between that and, last week's luteal, I'm like, I've got to have my little prompting questions.
Yeah.
I feel more legit.
Cheat sheet.
Too. Yeah. I'd love to just, get started with maybe a couple like little icebreakers about like what's turning us on and off in life right now, before we dive into some of because I know you focus with men and I love that, that you're such a strong advocate for men. And I'd love to, explore some common sexual struggles and maybe go to some of these questions that I had or had chimed in from a couple of friends. So yeah, what's turning you off and on in life this moment? And it can be sexual, non-sexual, it can be anything.
What's turning me on is slowness. This is my new thing. My mentor says, go as fast as the slowest part of you. And that is the way to become embodied, to attune, to really feel into pleasure. And pleasure doesn't have to just be sexual either. It's all things in life. It's taste, it's smell, it's, auditory, it's visual, it's everything, it's touch. So that's been the new trajectory I'm on because I've always been a very neurotic person. And then radical honesty. That's been a thing for a while for me, but I guess I'm learning the definition more because when I first leaned into that, I was prone to oversharing and trying to bypass intimacy that way. So it's knowing when to feel safe and be honest with someone.
I love that. Even your just invitation and voicing it to be slower, like gives me permission. It's like, okay, I can take a deep breath.
I know. I saw myself on a podcast like the other day and I was talking so fast. So I'm like, Coral, we're going to do some breath work every time we go in moving forward. And
we can take a breath right now.
Yeah. Take lots of pauses. Just molten lava. Yeah.
I love it because I can tend to be like a little squirrel sometimes.
I can relate.
And I totally like get the oversharing thing too. And I didn't realize, I hadn't radically opened and healing journey healing journey through openness, but now there is a little bit more discernment about, I'm like, okay, what do I feel comfortable sharing? And like, not everybody needs to know all the ins and outs and nooks and crannies. And like, have they, earned that space or that confidant or type of energy?
Yeah, it's tough because in my experience, after being repressed and living a double life, from sex work for so long, then when I came out with everything or was doxxed, but then stepped into my truth, I felt everyone felt like they were entitled to everything, to my truth. Like, and I didn't owe anyone an answer. So I leaned really heavily into that because I wanted to get my message across. But then it was like, my nervous system kind of just froze. I was in like freeze mode where I just didn't know who I actually was within that. Like, I'm like, who is Coral without speaking these things? So it's been interesting because also given the work that I do, what I share like publicly it's more comfortable for me to do that than like one-on-one with someone. There's people I haven't even had conversations with about my past that we talk about normal things and then they see me making appearances on podcasts or going on social and talking about these things and they never ask me. So I'm like, and I don't bring it up either. So there's still work to be done there for sure.
Oh, I think that's an interesting point too. Like the wideness versus like the one-on-one, like confiding.
Yeah, and it's almost like more comfortable to start a relationship anew and, with my new self, my embodied self, then kind of regress and go back to trying to redefine the relationship that was. That is still challenging.
I love too that you mentioned like your past with sex. Or whenever I discovered your story, I was like, oh wow, she's open about it. I've had on and off like experience in that space too, and I was like, there's a big difference in deciding to share something and then being outed. And I was like, oh my god, like that is that. I'm like, my heart went out to you because when I watched this video, I'm like, holy shit, like to not have that choice or to be outed by someone. That's challenging and fucking tough. And like you're putting in a vulnerable space that you didn't choose to be in some ways. And I admire your courage to continue sharing and whether on, on certain capacities, whether it's like broadcasting on social, whether it's in intimate spaces. Cause I love that your work that you're doing. And would you say that is, that experience led to being a driver in, your advocacy for men?
Yeah, 1000%. I had this whole idea of what sex work was. And my experiences of sex were not the healthiest before I got into it. Um, as a fearful avoidant type, and I had a lot of wounding around sex. I weaponized it, I used it to get validation. And then when I started doing sex work, I realized that there are so many reasons that men go seeking that. It's not just about pleasure. It's not just about validation. It's not just about connection. It can be all of those things. It can be none of those things. So what I found the most interesting that's like really stuck with me is I always equated monogamy to good and like infidelity to bad. And there's so much nuance in between. Like I met some really great men and a lot of single men too who just could not find that intimacy out there in the real world. And I felt for them, And in a way, it was very cathartic for me as well because it was this radical experience of honesty and vulnerability that was unmatched in the real world. These men would, tell me things and share things with me that they would never share with a spouse, with a partner, with a best friend. And in that container, there's so much freedom to explore because it's baseline transactional. So anything beyond that is just because you're opting in and you're deciding to share and you're deciding to explore. So very little of it was about the act itself, which will confuse a ton of people. Mind you, that's not the case for all sex workers. It's positioning. Like you can position yourself as a super vulgar podcast host that's making jokes all the time and like, this guy came on my face and blah, 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 and LOL. Or, you can have this analytical view of like sex and go deeper and talk about how meaningful it is to you. And a lot of sex workers are like that as well. I knew a lot of women that, they just wanted the lifestyle and they would be the ones to go to Vegas and like just be demeaned and demoralized by men. I could never do that. Like I felt like more of a whore in my dating life than I ever did in sex work ever. I actually was respected so much, and in probably a insidious way, it affected my ability to relate in the real world because I got this validation. I was in control. I ran the show and I got to be the fantasy. I was never the whole person. So it served them very well. And I realized I had a knack for like delving into what the core desires of men were and not just sexually, what they were seeking emotionally, psychologically, and of course, physically, and what they were telling people in the outside world. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I relate in so many ways because some of the people that I met, like we didn't even have a sexual relationship, but it was a very big driver for like connection and intimacy or like fun and playfulness at times too, like karaokeing in a room together or like, and them saying it's like the best night of their lives. And the confessions of longings and desires and secrets. And like you mentioned core desires, I'm so curious too about your experience and like what some of the core drivers in those aspects were. Like what were they coming or what like emotionally? Um,
So a lot of men's wounding comes from the Madonna-Whore
oh
complex,
yeah, let's go
which is a split where men can't reconcile that women are whole. So they either, you know, see women as pure and virtuous and sexless, or promiscuous, desirable, and unworthy of love and respect. And that typically comes from the mother wound.
there.
So there's a few ways that can happen. Um, one of them is the mother gives inconsistent love. So, she only awards, say, performance and good behavior and just isn't consistent. So then he puts her up on a pedestal. And then so women are now on a pedestal, but, a sexually free woman is seen as emotionally unsafe.
Mm.
And then there is shame around sex. So if your mother or parents or society shames you for being sexual, sex is bad, women that dress like that are bad, it's dirty, then those desires become repressed. So then the man grows up to believe that and repress his desires. So he'll end up with the Madonna, but then yearn for, the whore. And then, we go into emotional unavailability. So if the mother was unavailable, maybe she remarried, maybe she traveled a lot for work, she just wasn't available, then the man will seek emotion or will seek validation through sex. And he'll go for an emotionally unavailable partner who's chaotic and exciting, highly sexualized, and mistake that for an emotional connection. And then lastly, there's the mixed messages around masculinity. So the mother will say, be nice, be a good boy, but then she will date or be married to the very assertive, dominant, perhaps, toxic masculine. And so the man, the young boy who grows into a man, will then split, and either he'll be the nice boy that has these secret desires, or he'll rebel and become the dominant, assertive or toxic masculine who is always with the whore archetype. So everything can basically be traced back to that. And I think why men go to sex workers is, initially they're looking for that whore experience. It's like they can be completely uninhibited and feel like they don't have to repress anything. But, what ends up happening a lot is like they ended up seeing the whore as the Madonna as well. And I've seen that reconciliation play out, and it's pretty fascinating. I would like it to not result in men having to go see sex workers for that to happen. I'd like to preempt it. And that's like why I love the work that I do, because, the more you repress or suppress your core desires, the bigger they get. And then you tend to eroticize trauma, and then they get out of control. And that's where the cheating comes in, sliding into girls' DMs when your girlfriend's in the next room, or sleeping with the escort on a work trip, or having an affair at the office. And there's a way we can address this before it gets to that point.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. If someone is like listening, I'm like, okay, I think that I may fall into the emotionally unavailable category or the, one of the other ones that you described. How do they begin like that self-inquiry process of identifying it and then integrating it into, their dating choices or their life?
Great question. So you have to start by identifying the origin of the split. So when did that happen? What was it, as all the things I just listed? And what did you make that mean? And then what are you afraid will happen if you're found out? What are you afraid the woman that you're dating will find out about you if she knew, what you truly desired? And then how do you cope? What do you do? So those reasons I just listed, do you go to porn? Do you cheat? Do you secretly text message women behind your partner's back? What do you do that perpetuates that split? And then you have to practice asserting yourself. So it's not an easy process. You have to get really real with yourself. But honestly, what's the alternative? And, I have a whole framework around that because that's kind of that's the root of everything that I work with. And like we spoke about with sex work, similarly, there's ways to A/B test women, right? Like you shouldn't just pour on every desire, every thought you've ever had. You don't know if it's safe to do that. So there's ways you can start introducing those things and say, listen, I'm prone to splitting. I'm prone to doing this. This is what I've done in past relationships. And I don't want to do that anymore. And you would be surprised that when you lead with that honesty, the response you get from women. Because what do women want the most? What is the most attractive thing to them? Feeling safe. So if you're honest, she's going to feel safe. And it's going to be this beautiful feedback loop where you step in one toe at a time.
I love that. Yeah, when I think back, I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The times where I didn't feel safe when they weren't honest, and I gave them the space to be honest.
Yeah.
That was the most challenging. I'm like, why can't I'm like, I give you space. I think I'm communicating or giving like an open space for you to bring all of who you are, your desires or your boundaries, your fears. So when I find out about something, then there's like, I feel a little bit betrayed because I gave you the space and now I don't trust you or feel safe.
It is the weirdest thing. I actually had an experience not too long ago with a gentleman that I was not exclusive with. He was a lot younger than me. But, we were spending time together and it was really healing in a lot of ways because he was a lot younger. So it was like I was out of a relationship and then, I met him and we just had a profound physical connection, to be honest. That was very healing. And so I said to him out of the gates, honesty and trust is imperative for this to work. And unprovoked by me, he said on our second date, oh, just to let you know, I deleted Hinge and we deleted this. And I was like, first of all, I didn't say this, but I'm like, because I don't owe him anything.
Yeah.
He offered this up, which I was like, okay. I didn't really say anything to it. I was like, okay. He's like, I just can't talk to two women at once. And I was like, okay, you're also 25, so you should be, but sure. And then it was like a week later, I'd asked him if he'd ever had a threesome, and he was like, no, but I matched with this porn star on Hinge last week, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? And I just checked him right then. I was like, listen, when you say this, my nervous system short circuits. This whole relationship, although it's not a formal relationship, is built on trust. We need to have that, or else what is the point? I'm not safe to explore. I can't go there with you. So if we don't have that, we have nothing. And when I'm not even asking you for any sort of truth or interrogating you, why would you offer up a lie? And I kind of think I've gotten to the bottom of it because it's happened more than once. It's happened a few times with me. And I think it's because of my experience and me being so open with that it does intimidate men. And I think I have inadvertently emasculated them, which is something I'm always working on. And so they feel like they need to have something to themselves, right? They need to have some experience to themselves that they don't want to let me in on, because for them that represents autonomy, even though it doesn't actually. It's an illusion of autonomy. But so I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, you mentioned Hinge and dating apps too. I'm like, oh, I want to get your thoughts on that arena.
I deleted it right after that.
I downloaded it because I was having a moment before I moved into my new place and met my current interest, or one of them, and I was like, okay, well, how am I going to meet someone? I'm like, I've just turned 37. I'm like, how am I going to meet someone? They're not going to come up to my door. I guess I've got to put myself out there in some ways. And so I wanted to go to this horse riding thing that a girlfriend had posted. I was like, well, maybe I'll download and find a cute little date to go explore there and go. But then I definitely deleted it within a week or two. I was just like, I just can't. I was like, I just can't do this anymore. And I think you shared something on Instagram one time that I loved about putting yourself in new spaces, or like just getting out and about as an alternative to dating apps. Or like, I would love for you to just like, expand on
I mean,
your thoughts
easier
on
said
dating
than
apps.
done, and
Yeah.
I'm sort of a hypocrite when it comes to this. My girlfriend is staying with me right now. She's the one that's
I'm
hosting
so pumped.
the erotica night
Yeah.
tonight. And we went to the coffee shop behind my house, and I'm like, in sweats, messy bun, hood up, and I was joking, and I was like, she's like, there's so many cute guys here. I'm like, I know, like all it takes is for me to not work in my bed, some days, or from my kitchen table, actually get dressed and go to this coffee shop, and like, I could probably actually get asked out in real life. And she's like, why don't you do that? I'm like, I don't know. Like that's the easiest thing you can do that will change your entire energetic field. And I
Mhm.
do things to mix it up, but it's been a lot of reprogramming because we've had to deprogram ourselves from this dating app culture, this like quick fix culture, which
Mhm.
is an illusion of options that's not really there because it's one dimensional what you're seeing on the screen, right?
Mhm.
For me, it takes a lot for me to be interested in someone. Attraction on its own, physical attraction does nothing for me.
Mhm.
The older I get, the more nuanced it gets. So I really need that in-person experience to get the essence of someone.
Mhm.
And men will say that too. They can see the hottest woman on a dating app, and since they're, visual and they're single cued, so they just need to see a pretty face, a great chest or a great ass, and like that's going to make them swipe. Doesn't mean they're bad for it. It's just that's what they're looking for initially. That's
Mhm.
what attracts them. Whereas women have a holistic approach, like when they're swiping, they're actually reading
Mm.
the
Mm.
profile.
Mhm.
There's data that shows they spend 14 more seconds on average longer reading a profile than a man does. So, yeah, we shouldn't, vilify one or the other. Men aren't bad for that. But yeah, putting ourselves in different settings. And for me, I had to check myself too because I'm more attracted to introverted men.
Mm.
I I'm an extrovert. Well, I'm an ambivert, but like if we're one on one or if I'm with like up to 6 people, I will talk over everyone, which I need to work on. But I don't like men to be like that. I need
Mm.
a yang to my yang, and this goes with
Mm.
polarity.
Mm.
So that might be a traditionally like masculine trait to be more dominant in conversation, but this is why it's about polarity and not
Mm.
sticking, to fixed masculine and feminine. So I realized since, I am the more assertive, extroverted one, that I probably need to start talking to men. And I'm not saying like
Mm.
I just mean breaking the ice and like
Mhm.
saying hi. Just saying hi or just smiling at them
Mm.
because when I'm out in public, as a lot of women are, we're in our own worlds, we're not making eye contact and it's all left on the guy. And that's pretty
Mhm.
brutal, especially seeing as the last few years they've been conditioned to
Mm.
not have a rejection tolerance through apps.
Mm.
So we've kind of got to meet them halfway. And
Mhm.
just by like smiling, or, having warm body language, holding eye contact for like 3 seconds, which sounds easy as hell, but it's not. But, doing those nonverbal cues, it takes 29 of them to actually signal interest in a way that a
Wow.
man will finally pick up. 29 of those subtle cues. So it's like, do you do that or do you just bite the bullet and say, "Hey." Is that so hard? And for some reason, we think that's terrifying. But if we're asking men to sack up and ask us out
Mhm.
in the real world,
Mm.
then the least we can do is drop our handkerchief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I love that. Drop our finger, open the door
yeah.
a little bit, leave
Yeah.
a ribbon on the door. I love that. So you mentioned a couple things from that I'm like, "Oh, okay, I wanna go maybe in that direction or this one." Because I would love to explore, like, polarity more because I haven't really read a lot about it, or, like, those dynamics. And I just love what you said too about, um, like, opening them and, opening the space for them to approach. And it made me think of like, also, like, the Me Too, like,
Mhm.
are they a little bit more hesitant to even approach since that movement? because of like not only rejection, but like, okay, how is this going to be taken or seen or read? Or, I could see where there would be even more increased fear
Yeah.
in that capacity. And I'm like, 29 freaking clues.
I know.
I'm like, I thought my one eye contact. Or
I know. I thought
something.
this was okay.
Yeah. And I'm feeling awkward as hell.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
back. Okay, I gotta look.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whichever direction you want to go, I totally want to explore more of the polarity stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually I was on a date not too long ago and with again the same younger gentleman. I'm throwing him under the bus big time here. But the check came and it was sitting there for like 20 minutes. And then I just was like, I just grabbed it and I paid for it. I was so passive aggressive and I was pissed off, and then I couldn't hold it in. So I was like, listen, if you think that this is some Mrs. Robinson, dynamic, that I'm just gonna take care of you, this is not what this is. And I got really angry. And I was like, I don't feel like a woman. I'm super dysregulated. Like my body's shutting down. I'm able to say this out loud. So that's a good thing. But I didn't know how to like alchemize it. And he was really calm and he said, I'm just kind of confused. Because you brought your card out and then, I just didn't want to get in the way of you paying. And we got into it. And at first I was like, bullshit. And then we got into it and it's like, this is actually a thing with a lot of women these days. And I've talked to plenty of men that I have no sort of romantic relationship with that have given me their experiences of like being yelled at or vilified for opening a car door, or picking up a check. So that does happen. It does happen, and there's a lot of mixed messaging around that, which I didn't realize how much of an effect it has on men, especially the younger generation. I think, well, millennials and Gen Z are just very confused by it. And to be fair, we've had upwards of 12 new wave feminist movements in like the past decade. And there's been nothing for cisgender heterosexual men, right? So I understand the frustration. So there's a lot of pushback when, we're hearing about trans rights, which I'm a full advocate for, but I understand how the cisgender heterosexual man feels more repressed than anyone else out there. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And at the side note, I'm like, please open my car door. I'm like,
No, I was like, listen, let me get this straight. Like, I never want to pay. I never want to pay. I never want to pay. I did that for years. I've paid rent for boyfriends. Like I've done that. I have done so much work to not do that. So I never want to. Like, please don't feel like you're ever like, overgiving or being too kind. No such thing with me. Please provide.
I know. But I could totally get the mixed messaging because I have friends that, they were on like websites, like whether it was Seeking or some kind of sugar thing. But then they even had times when it came down to lunch or dinner, they're like, oh no, I'll pay, or I've got it, or their willingness to receive anything in that capacity.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh wow. I'm like, you're asking or you're showing up in certain spaces where it may be more likely to occur. Yeah. But then you're shutting it down when it actually comes time to like welcome in.
Yeah, that's been really difficult for me. Actually, that's my big core wound I've been working on, is my ability to receive, because a lot of that stems from, I think, sex work, where I call it provider privilege or escort entitlement. Yeah. So if, everything's transactional for you, then out in the real world, when you start dating, when you're with a partner, you feel like you owe them something. And so if someone wants to be with you just for you, you're confused by it. It's very unsettling. Doesn't feel safe. And so I would be prone to overcompensating and like, oh my God, someone actually accepts me, so I better make it even. I better pay for this. I better do something dramatic to show them that I couldn't just sit still and receive. But the more I know about masculinity, and I talk to a lot of men that are masculinity coaches that work a lot in this space. The best gift you can give a man to really embody his masculine is receiving from him. And receiving doesn't have to be monetary. Like, sure, that's great. And yes, they should get the check. But there's ways you can provide as a man that are as simple as like picking a daisy from the public park next door, making dinner, driving her to an appointment, to work. And I think a lot of men have conflated providership with monetary value, which I feel bad for them because they don't feel like they're ever good enough. The whole thing is men are never enough. They never feel like they're enough. And women always feel like they're too much. And both of those core beliefs get perpetuated by society and unfortunately by a lot of our past trauma in relationships.
Wow. I mean, like, I'm like, oh, I feel like some ahas are going off in me too, because like even like I'm like newly into this, like not even a month, like kind of courtship dating thing with my. Actually, I'll leave that detail out. But,
Next podcast.
Yeah. Drop some, keep real mint. No, but yeah, no, I've found like, because we met in the wild. Yeah, there's a piece of me sometimes where I do feel that, let me split this or let me get this or something. Or I see that like coming up in my interactions with him or witnessing it. So I'm like, oh, something to ponder and go back to myself. Because in other spaces, I'm like, oh yeah, like
yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. I was doing some deprogramming work on myself around it the other day, and because I had a tendency to choose unavailable men and not unavailable emotionally per se, that also happened, but like geographically, life stage, newly sober, startup was failing, something, long distance. And that was because my father was away as a touring musician as soon as I was born. He'd be away for like 6 weeks at a time, 4 weeks at a time. And so I equated love with distance and longing and yearning. So full presence super dysregulates me. So whenever a man has shown up for me as his authentic self and with intent, and it's crazy. I had all these revelations. I can trace this all the way back to like elementary school, and I've had the biggest crush on a boy. And then as soon as he'd ask me out, which was so innocent and harmless, I would like almost be like repulsed and like because it didn't feel safe for me. I would freak out. I would hide. I would run away, and that pattern became very pervasive in my adult years, and I could never figure out the origin of it because I have great parents. So it's taken a lot of work, and it continues to take a lot of work to like, when I want to run, when I want to pay, when I want to, get the check, and when I don't feel okay just being, I have to take the slowness is take a beat and sit through that discomfort.
Noted. It just had this like within the last couple of weeks of like, I really like longing. Like I'm like, there's something about the longing that I love. And I've tried unavailable in all sorts of ways, whether it was prison, newly sober.
That's good. You beat me.
Married at certain times, although not anymore. And emotionally, all of them. I'm like, but I was like, oh wow, it's the longing. I really like that yearning because Dad was a truck driver growing up. I loved our relationship. So gone.
Yep. Same.
Yeah. And then I could also sense his love and affection for me, although it wasn't always voiced. But yeah.
So then what we do is, we fill in the gaps with fantasy because I never saw my father full time. He was never a whole person. So I put him up on a pedestal. This is mirrored in the Madonna-Whore complex. Women have daddy issues, right? So I filled in those voids with fantasy and made up things about him where, to my mom, he was a great father to me from what I saw, but to my mom, he wasn't like the best partner because he wasn't there all the time. He wasn't emotionally present all the time. And so, we just project, right?
Mhm.
And then, this shows up sexually as well because we eroticize our trauma.
Mhm.
So to what you said about, the yearning and the longing and same, my favorite thing is edging. And it was such a crazy revelation
Mm.
that,
How do
it
you say?
was more fulfilling and exciting
Mm.
to me than the act itself a lot.
Mm.
Right? Like, it
Mhm.
was like, because I could just fantasize about it instead of experience the full presence, which
Mhm.
was a trip.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, "Is that why?" Sometimes I'm like, "I don't need the big O."
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
like
yeah. Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah.
it's so interesting. Yeah, when after like, I was writing this book and doing all kinds of things, and I was reflecting and going back, I was like, "Oh my god," I had so many aha moments and epiphanies and, connected dots. I was like, "Oh, that's why I had this choice or make this, have this dating, like, um, what is it, proclivity?"
Mhm.
Um, but I read this book called Getting the Love You Want by, like, Dr. Harville Hendricks, and it talks about, like, how the relationship we have with our primary caregivers is oftentimes the good and, bad or positive and negative traits shows up in who we're dating, how we're dating, and, like, repairing some kind of childhood trauma, and so whenever I was looking at someone, I was like, "Oh my god, I've been trying to date my dad,"
Yeah.
and initially, like, years ago, I think when I was in my early to mid-20s, if someone had said daddy issues, I'd have been like, "No,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't have daddy issues.
Same.
I have 2 great dads."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I would do the same thing,
then now I'm
and
like, "Okay, yeah, I
I
do."
was like, my whole thing was I had the opposite of daddy
Yeah.
issues. Actually, it was really funny, like, a few weeks ago for my dad's birthday, because we're, like, best friends. Um, I told him, I was like, "So I figured out my father wound." And he's really into Jungianism, and he has a
Mhm.
Jungian analysis and, does a lot of shadow work and he's willing to riff on anything with me. And I sent him a Google Doc of of my father wound, and he was like, "Yeah, but I'm like a good guy though." I'm like, "Yeah, but like, I mean, it's your fault." He's like, "But I mean, it's your interpretation." I'm like, it's your fault." Like, we were just it was actually quite funny, but he was really receptive to like acknowledging it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, "Oh," my dad died, I'm like, "Oh, I wonder if he would be open and receptive to that now,"
Yeah.
although I've had some interesting encounters with him in, like, psychedelic spaces.
Mm.
Like, I did a ketamine series, and, like, his inner child or younger child was dancing with mine,
Oh,
and we had
wow.
this beautiful, like, encounter in what I call my ketamine oracle space.
Yeah, I
'Cause
know it
I'm
well.
yeah, I'm like, "Where am I?"
Yeah.
And so we had this moment, I'm like, "Oh, am I supposed to, like, feel it all?" Or he's like, "Yeah, sorry about that." And he's like, "I've been here the whole time, you can always ask for, like, my guidance or assistance or help." And I was like, "Wow, it's just interesting." But yeah, when my mom read my book, she's like, "I feel like I damaged you," or da da da. I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
yes and no." Like, yes, but I don't know what parent didn't make
What
a
parent
formative
doesn't?
impression, yeah, on their
Exactly.
kids.
Exactly.
But I don't see you. I was like, "Really, it's about my daddy wounds or my
Yeah.
father wounds."
Yeah.
But, and I didn't really position you or, in my mind as, like, the source of all my trauma.
And it's so funny,
But
I was the opposite. I made my mom bad for many
mm,
years, and my mom came from a lot of trauma, um, sexual abuse, and her father took his life when she was
mm,
a child, and, she kinda became the parent to her mother and to her younger sister, and she became a social worker and then worked with, like, street level sex workers, right? So
wow.
her view on sex and sex work was very, very skewed.
Mhm.
And so I rebelled. So again, if we go back to like the
Mm,
mirroring of the Madonna-Whore, I did that to myself. Like, women can also have that split within themselves.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, yeah, I'm like, "Oh, now I need to go back and, like" yeah, because 'cause I'm like or yeah, in certain spaces, I can probably sense myself showing up as one or the
Oh, and
other.
I would find evidence to do that.
Mhm.
I still catch myself sometimes if I'm, had a couple drinks and I'm at a dinner table and I go into this condition of like, I'm just gonna be the whore by making this vulgar joke because it's safer for me to do that than to just like sit in silence and be seen, or be overly flirtatious or seductive, because that's a protective mechanism.
Like the humor deflecting.
Yeah, and then I'm like, why doesn't anyone see the Madonna in me? Because I'm not even letting them.
Yeah, and maybe they will if you just like allow them to just see.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a potent reminder. I was like, yeah, what do we call the Madonna-Whore on the female side? But it's the same.
I'm calling it the same.
Yeah, I know. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'll kind of connect these two things. We have about 10 minutes left. About you posted something the other day. And since I guess a lot of them stem from like the Madonna-Whore complex, but about a lot of the common sexual struggles that men are encountering today. And you listed 4. I'd love to get your insight or take on some of those common struggles, or like how to navigate or how to unpack some of the layers, or what do you suggest in that capacity? Is it going back to the Madonna-Whore?
Yeah. I mean, sexual issues are physiological and psychological, right? So we have to look at them holistically. It's usually a both and. And if you go to traditional sex therapists or doctors, they usually just treat the singular issue, which isn't actually treating it, right? So common issues are performance anxiety, erectile dysfunction, delayed ejaculation, premature ejaculation, suppressed and repressed desires, shame around sex. And a lot of those are intertwined. If we're looking at something like erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, delayed ejaculation, trouble staying hard, then we always want to look at the physiological components first. So nerve functioning, hormone levels, the physicality of all of that, and before we then go to looking at the psychological element. So we want to do like a whole holistic intake. But strangely, the same methods that are used for treating, like, say, premature ejaculation are used for treating delayed ejaculation. So it's all about getting into the body and mindful self-pleasure practices and somatic awareness. So men are, raised as little boys to experience pleasure one way. Like when when they first start discovering masturbating, what are they doing? They're masturbating like really quickly because they're afraid mom's going to walk in. It's like this one note wonder. And mom usually probably did walk in at some point, right? So then they associate that with high anxiety, nerves, excitement. And again, we eroticize our trauma. So then that high anxiety state is conflated with arousal. So then later on in life with partnership, it's like we're only experiencing sex in one way. And that's just not how it plays out. That's why a lot of men lose interest in partners and start to numb out or oversensitize because they don't have an erotic lexicon. There's so much more available to them. So to really get familiar with other types of touch, other types of sensation, and track your arousal. Like I have my male clients keep an arousal tracker.
Oh, cool.
And so on a daily basis, like what are they aroused by and what are the feelings behind that? What do you notice? What are the judgments that come up? And then we dig into it because some of those arousal points are benign. They just are what they are and that's fine. And others have a deeper meaning to them.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think that's such a good like tool and takeaway. I'm like, even for myself now.
No,
I'm
it's
like,
great for men and women.
Yeah, I'm like,
too.
I want to explore this.
Yeah.
Oh, and you mentioned like the different types of touch. That's been something I've been loving like so much of the sensual lately. And probably like not even lately, but more when I can dial it back, I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, like exploring like the different types of touch, like the different element styles, like whether I'm like, do I like soft and slow? Do I like the fiery and scratchy? Do I like grounding, earthy?
Totally.
And
Kimmy Inch just taught me all about that at her
cool.
workshop the other week, the 7 layers. And I knew them, but I didn't have words for them. So I was like, oh, I'm going to totally incorporate that into my framework.
Yeah.
And it's so awesome. Because again, that's expanding your pleasure, your erotic landscape. There's so much more available to you than you're even aware of. And, to also tie that into the erotic blueprint, great tool to use. I love using that even for like when I meet a new partner, a potential partner. Before you engage in any sort of sexual activity, like if you send them the erotic blueprint test, first of all, you're going to see if they opt into it. Like if you want them to yes and you want them to agree and escalate with you and see if they can opt in. And then it also tells you like if you're compatible and where you're aligned and where there might be some misunderstandings. So you can go into it with like a framework. But it's really interesting because I started off when I first took that test, I was number 1 energetic, still am, and then shapeshifter, and then kinky, and then sexual. I think my last one was sensual. And then I had a very, very sensual partner. And I always used to knock sensuality. Like, I thought it was lame. Like, I was like, oh, like soft jazz music and like bubble baths, like boring. I want dirty, primal, profane. And then I had a lover that was just transformed my view on that. And he really caused me to be present in my body and slowed me down. So I was introduced to so many other erogenous zones and sensation, and it was extremely transcendent. So now my second is sensual, and his first is energetic. And so it's really interesting to see how they interplay.
Yeah, no, I've been meaning to send my new interest the erotic quiz. I'm like curious. I'm like, where we shared like some like sexiest moments that happened to us last night. We were just having a conversation like, oh, tell me, some past encounter.
Erotic
yeah. And use that language. But yeah, I was like, oh, okay, I'm curious. And I want to peek behind the curtain a little more. I totally think you'd be open to it. Okay, so I'm like arousal tracker, core erotic blueprint. I just started reading The Erotic Mind, so I haven't.
Okay.
I mean, I'm like only a couple chapters in.
You got to talk to me when you finish it.
Okay, I will.
Oh my God.
Like, fascinated.
It's like you talk to
stuff.
like any one in the space, like when you talk to Leola or Kimmy, or any of my colleagues. It's like, what was one of the books that changed your life and brought you to this work? It was like The Erotic Mind.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Pumping that back up in the queue. I tend to have like book ADD, so like sometimes I'm reading this and a physical copy of this and something on my Kindle.
So do I.
I need to just like hone in and finish something. I love everything that you brought here today. And there's something else that you mentioned, but now I'm having a little brain fart about it. And if it's gone, it's gone. And I'm like, oh, Kimmy's thing. I was going to try to go to that, but it was sold out. So, maybe catch that on the next one.
She's in demand, that woman.
I would love for you to share like anything that you got cooking or that you want to share. Just got a couple more minutes left about if there's anything that you want to just express now to have the space that we haven't covered, and then also like how to connect with you, any other like programs or events you have coming up, all that jazz.
Yeah. So I just finally launched my website 2.0, coralosborne.com. And every month at the top of the month, I give away 5 coaching sessions, completely free, no commitment required to the first 5 men that respond. And I give them a tool that they can walk away from that session with for any of those issues that we mentioned, everything from, performance anxiety to erectile dysfunction to premature ejaculation to desire discrepancy to shame around sex. This tool can be used across the board. And then I'm launching my podcast next month called The Next Man Up. And it's me talking to a bunch of dudes about the paradoxes of masculinity and the misconceptions around masculinity and sexuality. And that's, been part and parcel with my own exploration of, there's so much more left to learn for me. So, yeah, that's what I have coming up. And then on the event section on my website, you can always see where I'm going to be speaking, what kind of events I'm going to be hosting, which are usually between here and Austin or New York and LA.
Cool. I'm so excited. Thank you for coming on. I feel like I could peek behind the curtain with you so much more. Like there's like so many. I'm like had like
I
2 or 3
know.
pages. I might have to have you come back on
I can
whenever you're back
relate.
in town or something.
I
Or
could so relate. That's how you know it's a good conversation, though,
yeah, I'm
because you
like,
just like are
dang,
able to riff on those top like 3
yeah.
points.
Well, so good. And thank you guys for tuning in. Stay in touch for next week. Can't think of the top of my head who actually it's going to be a comedian. So we'll dive into that area of exploration and expression and check out Coral. And I'll put all of her show notes and links in the show notes or my assistant Tels will. Thank you. Thank you. Cool.